Last year I released a full playthrough of Iron Maiden's Man on the Edge right here on this channel. And I really enjoyed revisiting the song and diving into the parts that I hadn't really paid much attention to before, especially Dave and Janick's guitar solos. There are some seriously cool licks in both of those. Now recently, that video popped up in my YouTube feed, so I watched it again and I noticed that there was one part that didn't quite sound right. Janick Gers' interlude before the guitar solos. Now this part feels intense and chaotic. Its thrashy rhythm is made up of syncopated eighth notes played with a loose but tight feel that is a key element of Iron Maiden's sound. And my version of it, the notes were all there and the rhythm was correct, so musically it was exactly what's played on the record. However, it just didn't sound and feel like the original. And since the notes, rhythm, and overall phrasing were spot on, there was only one possible reason why it still wasn't sounding right: the articulation. So what do I mean by articulation? Well, it's all about how the notes are played. For example, are you picking each one? Or are you also using hammer-ons and pull-offs? Are you hitting a note dead on, or are you sliding into it or even bending to it from a lower note? These little details can completely change how a part sounds and feels, even if the notes and rhythm are exactly the same. It's what makes the guitar such an expressive instrument. So here's how I was playing the Man on the Edge interlude. It's all there, except it's a bit too fluid. It's missing some of that tightness that makes it feel so thrashy. When I listened to the original a little closer, I realized that Janick is picking most of the notes. But with the fingering that I was using, if I picked most of the notes, it wouldn't have had the same feel at all, and it just sounded even less like what Janick is doing. So I looked up some live performances here on YouTube, and I tried to catch a glimpse of Janick playing that part. And most of the clips I watched, it was either the video was too blurry or the camera was focused on something else during that part. But after a while, I came upon this video. When I saw that, it all made sense. And just one small question remained. How the hell am I supposed to play this? Because, well, let me show you what Janick is actually doing. That's insane. When you see him play it live, it looks like he's just having the easiest time, smiling and performing like the natural entertainer that he is. This is only possible because he's developed a very natural technique based on playing and performing live with other musicians. So he's not trying to play it, he's just playing it. Me, on the other hand, I had to work through it a little bit, and it actually ended up improving my string crossing as a result. So Janick, thanks for that. So now I'm going to break it down for you so that you can get a good picking workout and at the same time also gain a better understanding of how this riff works. Fortunately, it's just one pattern that he repeats in 4 positions on the neck. And while the picking might be a little tricky to master, it's always the same exact pattern throughout. So there are essentially 3 steps to mastering this riff: learning the pattern for the picking hand, learning the pattern for the fretting hand, and finally, learning to move it around quickly. Simple enough, right? Of course, simple doesn't necessarily mean easy. And in this case, it definitely is not. So you'll probably need a good amount of patience to get through this riff to the point where you can play it along with the original song at speed. The key, as always, is consistent and correct practice over time. So work on this diligently without rushing, and you'll have it down before you know it. Let's start with the picking. So to isolate the picking hand, we're going to be laying our fret hand over the 7th fret, so that the only notes ringing will be those natural harmonics. So the picking pattern is downstroke on the 4th string, then you pull off, downstroke on the 5th string, and now we'll do the next step 3 times. Downstroke on the 3rd string, upstroke on the 4th string, downstroke on the 5th string, and again, downstroke on the 4th string, pull off, and finally a downstroke on the 5th string. So altogether, it looks like this. Now occasionally he'll pick all the notes on that last bit, so you add one stroke. So now that we've got the picking down, let's look at what the fretting hand is doing. So here it is step by step. Start by grabbing the 7th fret of the D string with your pinky and have your index on the 5th fret. Now pick the D string with the downstroke, pull off to the 5th fret, and then hit the A string at the 7th fret with an upstroke. Next, move your index down to the G string at the 4th fret, pick that note with a downstroke. Then you hit the 7th fret of the D and A strings, both with your pinky. And you'll need to do a slight finger roll to avoid having the two notes bleed into one another. Now from there, do the same thing again, but starting with the 5th fret of the G string. Once again, starting with the 4th fret of the G string. And finally, one more time like the very first step, starting with the 7th fret of the D string. And again, on the album, it sounds like he's mostly picking the note at the 5th fret instead of pulling off. So altogether, the pattern goes like this. Now that we've got the pattern all figured out, we need to learn to move it across the fretboard to follow the chord changes. So Dave Murray and Steve Harris are playing the chords A, B, D, and E. Janick follows those changes by moving the pattern up the fretboard, as the first note on the D string corresponds to the chord of the accompaniment. So he starts on the 7th fret for A, on the 9th fret for B, up to the 12th for D, and finally up to the 14th fret for E. They double up on each chord the first time around, so it gives you a little time to adjust and get comfortable in each position. But on the second time, the pattern is only played once with each chord, so you have to shift quickly without much time to think about what you're playing. And that's all there is to it. So it's an unusual pattern and it can be a bit awkward at first, but it is simple and straightforward. It just takes some practice to get it down tight. Now just watch for that finger roll at the 7th fret and make sure that your muting is on point so that you don't get unwanted noise in between the notes. If you'd like to see more videos like this one, and if there's a riff or a lick that gives you a hard time, whether it's from a Maiden song or from a different artist, let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to keep your suggestions in mind for a future video. As always, thank you all so much for watching and stay tuned for more licks of the beast.